Hello, and welcome to Sonata She Wrote. This video is my analysis of Mahler's song Ging heute Morgen übers Feld from the song cycle Lieder Eines Fahrenden Gesellen. The analysis of the song is complete, but actually, this is part of a much larger analysis of the first movement of Mahler's Symphony No. 1 in D major, the Titan, which is, for now, exclusively available to patrons on Patreon. If you join my Patreon for any amount, even $1, you will have full access to the video, so I hope you enjoy. Now, finally, we've emerged from the primordial ooze of the introductory section and begin what I think we can fairly call the exposition. The main theme, what appears to be the primary theme, is obviously related to the seed motive of the descending fourth, but it's also a reference to an earlier work of Mahler's, the orchestral song cycle Lieder Eines Fahrenden Gesellen, or Songs of a Wayfarer. That's right, we are stepping outside of symphonic and sonata analysis and into my show within a show, where I examine song cycles and occasionally individual lieder. The song this symphony takes one of its main themes from is Ging heute Morgens übers Feld, or This Morning I Went Over the Meadow. You can see how it dovetails perfectly with the idea of nature and roaming through it. The recording I'll be using in this analysis is of Marilyn Horne in 1979, accompanied by Zubin Mehta leading the Los Angeles Philharmonic.
Ging heut Morgen übers Feld, da noch auf den Riesen hing, sprach zu mir der lust'ge Fink, ei du Geld. Guten Morgen, ei Geld, du wirst ist eine schöne Welt, schöne Welt. Sieh, schön und flink, wie mir doch die Welt gefällt.
Obviously, the scale of what's happening is quite different from the symphony, but there is a similarity in the introductory dominant A that ushers in the main theme. In the song, we're hearing multiple perspectives. The initial voice, the narrator, if you will, is walking through a field in the meadow. She then meets a cheerful finch who speaks to her. It says, "Hey, good morning. Isn't it a lovely world?" The narrator neither agrees nor disagrees, but there are some indications of how she might feel even at this early stage. When the finch says, "Isn't it a lovely world?" the harmony is the opening tonic 6/4 of a cadential 6/4 progression, which instead of resolving to the dominant, moves to a 6 chord. In the following line, the finch sings that the world is lovely and bright. It loves the world. But again, under both of these lines, we have first an unresolved dominant preparation, followed by a dominant chord which, because of the addition of 7th and 9th, cannot really be called a half cadence.
Auch die Glockenblum am Feld hat mir lustig guter Ding, mit den Glöckchen klinge, kling, klinge, kling. Ihren Morgenlust geschellt, wirst ist eine schöne Welt, schöne Welt. Klinge, klinge, schönes Ding, wie mir doch die Welt gefällt, ja.
With a near identical trajectory, in verse 2, the narrator spies the harebell in the meadow. A harebell is a type of flower. It's apparently sometimes called a bluebell, which is odd, as it seems to be purple, but what are you going to do? The harebell, again in quotation marks, in the text, if unfortunately not in the score, exclaims, "Isn't it a lovely world?" But again, each of these statements is heard over unresolving cadential gestures. As the verse ends, Mahler begins to move the harmony toward the submediant B, emphasizing first 3, F sharp major, and then the new tonic of B major. Although Mahler has chosen to move this into the major mode, the use of 6 rather than 5 or even 4 seems meaningful. In D major, modulating to 6 would typically mean a modulation into the minor mode, not the major. Perhaps the major mode is simply an illusion. We also are prevented from really feeling this as a cadence due to the dominant F-sharp chord being in second inversion. Scale degree 2 in the bass moves into the tonic. This time, we actually managed to reach something which we might call a half cadence. The narrator seems to be able to engage with the world around her. She sings that in the sunshine, the world begins to sparkle. She can experience the joy of the world around her as well. Or at least, she wants to. The flowers and birds sing, again in quotations, "Good day. Isn't it a lovely world? Don't you think so?" The interrobang seems a little more aggressive than is necessary, but the music is trying to make it work. An extended cadential 6/4 does resolve to a dominant chord. The final verse, however, begins with a reference to the dominant chords of the opening, now lower and substantially slower in the cello's repeated F sharp. The text of this verse reads, "Will my happiness begin now? No, I think my happiness can never bloom." Although the song is sometimes analyzed as ending in F sharp major, Derek Cook labels it that way in his introduction to Mahler's music, I'm going to push back strongly against that idea. Although the main theme is now appearing around a perfect fourth, which begins on F sharp, the melody has been enervated and now falls downward for its final note rather than continuing to rise. On the second repetition of "Will my happiness now begin?", the winds and cellos attempt to re-emphasize the tonic of B major, pulling the narrator back toward the tonic. As the song comes to a close, first a secondary dominant of 5, and then eventually a whisper of a cadential 6/4, indicated by this B, which resolves to the third of the dominant in the F sharp major chord, eventually closes the song on a half cadence. The song, in my opinion, this is only my analysis after all, doesn't actually resolve to the tonic. As such, I would say this song is strongly in dialogue with a narrative archetype that we don't often see on the channel, often because it's so hard to pin down, that of irony. Byron Almen, in his text A Theory of Musical Narrativity, describes irony like this. Irony is a narrative of denial and subversion. It resists the comfortable convictions and illusions of the other archetypal forms, whereas romance has its quests, with its established stages and confrontations leading to reward and transformation. Irony shows us the meandering pointlessness and meaninglessness of such adventures. Almen goes on to say that irony, more than the other three archetypes, tends to sneak up on the listener. Cues to the presence of a narrative transgression are often hard to detect at first, as the music apparently unfolds a guileless discourse based on our conventional expectations. It is only later, when our expectations have been clearly subverted, that we can see to what extent this was both hidden and prefigured. Although you were cued into the encroaching irony by me as I took you through my analysis, I think it's extremely fair to say that as a listener, one might have two expectations, or perhaps the word assumptions is more appropriate, of this song. First, I don't think anyone listening to the text of this song for the first time would really suspect that the narrator is, apparently, miserable throughout the entire song. The text is so joyous, the music so harmonically simple, that I think the first three verses would lull almost anyone into a false sense of happiness. That sense is then subverted by the glass-shattering effect of the text and harmony of the fourth verse, which brings me to my final assumption, that the listener would assume the song would end with a tonic cadence. Although examples of non-resolving music do exist in the 19th century, it is extremely rare and shockingly deformative. I think, even to the ear without a score, it is apparent that this music is not actually resolving. As we move back into Mahler's First Symphony, this narrative archetype of irony and a subversion of expectations will certainly appear again. But for now, let's hear the opening of the exposition and discuss. So, as I said, if your interest is piqued by this analysis, and you just have to know what irony and this song could possibly have to do with the formal trajectory of Mahler 1, please consider joining my Patreon at patreon.com/sonatashewrote for any monthly amount.